Hey everybody, welcome to another episode of Purple Insider. Matthew Coller here, along with Mike Schopp for the Purple Insider Fantasy Schopp, presented by Underdog Fantasy, the easiest place to play fantasy sports and the fastest growing app in the industry. And remember to use that promo code PURPLE to sign up, and you get your special pick, your first-time deposit offer up to $1,000 in bonus cash. And I am feeling real good today, Mike, because not only did I come out sort of a winner last week, I got 5 out of 6 on the pick'em, and I needed one more tackle, and I didn't get it. So I got, or no, there was one too many tackles. So at the end of the game, I don't even know who it was, Taron Johnson. At the end of the game, he gets one more tackle, and I lose my my big pot, but still came out on the plus side. And I'm in second place in a best ball that we need to talk about that I drafted all the way back when this show began. So I'm rolling. And also we have a oh yeah, I mean, I've got the money stacks are over here and over here. Yeah, exactly. But we got to talk about the biggest news in the National Football League to start, which is the benching of Kirk Cousins. And we'll put a NFL spin on it and the fantasy spin as well. But at some point, they had no choice. And that point was, I think the interception on the throw over the middle against the Raiders was so poor. And the way that he's looked physically in the last weeks, I saw him in person. He can't move. There's no velocity on the football. Time comes for everybody, and it seems to have come for Kirk Cousins.
Yeah, I think maybe the most interesting thing about his situation is what happens to him after the season. I mean, he has a huge contract. He has a no trade clause, I believe. But some of these teams that are going to be drafting early in a season where it's expected to not be quarterback rich in the draft, would they turn to him if they could get him? I think that's possible. And I think one of the lessons of this season, in terms, I think of it from through a fantasy lens, but doesn't really matter. You have to give injuries more respect. Last year we had this with Tony Pollard. So Tony Pollard broke his leg in the playoffs, and everybody loved, was this 2 years ago? 2 years ago. Everybody loved Tony Pollard. And then he broke his leg in the playoffs. Whatever, that's a 6-month injury. He'll be fine. And he wasn't. I mean, he played that season. He was not efficient at all. And what happened? What happened was he wasn't 100%. I'll get to Cousins. This year we had McCaffrey, who was hurt before the season, and his season was a wash. We had Nick Chubb. Well, he's Nick Chubb. No. Jonathan Brooks had a torn ACL. He's young. That's a good bet. No. So, as Davis Maddock put it on ADP Chasing early in this week, has injury optimism ever won? You want to think it's going to turn around. I don't know. Like Cousins, there's always the Aaron Rodgers comparison, and Cousins is 5 or 6 years younger than Rodgers, who maybe is trending up a little bit this year. Matchups mean a lot. I don't know. All I'm saying is I think Cousins could have a market in a league where quarterback is everything. After that, like, what did the Falcons do? It's cool because they are still in it, and they made this move. I think, Matt, they were already sort of there, and we thought they might be before this game against Vegas. Like, what did Bill Barnwell show us? That they ran the ball on 1st and 10, 24 out of 25 times or something like that? Like, what? You're playing a bad team. You think you can maybe win the game that way, but it's the farthest thing from confidence in your quarterback. And so I think they were kind of already there. They won and then still made this move. I think that speaks well of them. We'll always talk about the bet on Penix and Cousins and what they did in the offseason. It's the 3rd or 4th year in a row where we want to scrutinize Atlanta's draft strategy, but I don't think that Cousins is necessarily done. We all want to find out if Penix is good, and I'm glad as a football fan, as fantasy player, dynasty player, that we get that chance before the season is over.
There's so many layers to this one. As far as Kirk, I hadn't gotten there in my brain yet of what they do with him in the offseason, because it's just such an interesting move with where their team is position-wise. Normally, a team, if they're going to the rookie quarterback, they would be completely out of the race. But if they tie the Tampa Bay Buccaneers for record, they get that division. And it seems like everything that I've heard about Michael Penix for the longest time, going back to even before the draft, was so overwhelmingly positive. And then he played great in the preseason. And then things that have just sort of been mentioned about him throughout the year is how happy they were with him behind the scenes. And maybe that was some people setting up for him eventually having to play this year. But even just going back to before he played at all in the draft season, he was the one where I couldn't believe that draft analysts didn't see it with him, because I had just heard that the NFL really loved him. But that was a lot of behind the scenes stuff. That was him mentally, his leadership, his character, his ability to diagnose defenses and remember plays, and then the cannon arm that he has. Actually, I was thinking about, if Michael Penix becomes a good quarterback, he might look like what Sam Darnold is doing this year, like using the strong arm, playing from the pocket, making plays from time to time. So when they made that draft pick, my first thought was they must be afraid that Kirk's injury is not going to hold up, because that is the nastiest one you can have, the Achilles injury. And even with Cam Akers, who's done a great job as the Vikings backup running back, you don't see his ability to cut the same way that he used to. And he was very young having that injury, as opposed to Kirk Cousins. And before when the Vikings hadn't made their decision yet with Cousins, I did some research and looked back at the ages of quarterbacks and at what point did they fall off. And I came up with 34 to 35. What Rodgers did, what Breeze did, what Manning did, Favre, they tricked us, because they're the GOATs. They're the best players to ever play that position. But if you go through everybody else, the Joe Flacco's, the Jay Cutlers, like Joe Flacco, by the same age as Kirk, was on his like fourth team. I mean, there's just a lot of quarterbacks who that punishment starts to add up. And if they don't have the cannon of Brett Favre, the brilliance of Tom Brady, you're not going to necessarily be able to continue to do it late into your career. And then an Achilles injury would add a lot to that from Cousins. He also didn't get to work out in the offseason, which is where you build your foundation to make it through 17 weeks. These guys all probably weigh 20 pounds less than they did at the start of the season, because they build all that up. He wasn't able to do it. And now I think you're seeing that result. So I think that what the Falcons did was really, really smart. And I mean, you used to say on your show, I don't know how many times, you should really just draft a quarterback all the time if you're not sure. And they draft a quarterback and everyone goes, how dare you? You signed one. How dare you draft a quarterback? And here we are. The season's not even over. And Michael Penix is going to take them down the stretch. Where I'm really fascinated is I think they have a good offense. Michael Penix is going to drop in with a good offensive coordinator in Zach Robinson. He got a lot of people open against the Minnesota Vikings and a lot of weapons that they have. And if you got some of these receivers, I think that's really going to help you, because they're going to have to throw the ball a lot more with Michael Penix.
And they go Giants, Washington, Carolina. I mean, matchups are so big. Again, layers, lots of different angles to this. You mentioned the point about the offseason and the lack of practice time. It's a new team too. Like, some of these guys get hurt and they're still on the same team. They've had experience with the same players. Not in this case. I mean, he goes, it's not only a new team, it's like all rookies and Mooney transplants, and just sort of like almost like a fantasy team, I want to talk more about this. Can I ask you, was Minnesota hoping for Penix at 10? Was it always McCarthy? So he goes 8 to Atlanta, and that you can, I guess, justify the pick. And I have a tougher time doing it than you might, but it was shocking when they did that. Was Minnesota going to draft Michael Penix if he was on the board, or it was always McCarthy?
Friends, gifting is hard, but here's a hint. Give the gift of connection from US Cellular. Not sure what that means? Here's a slightly more specific hint. You could choose 4 free phones and get 4 lines for $90 a month from US Cellular. Your family wants new phones? How do we know? They told us. The good news is that compared to wrapping presents, you're great at taking hints. So take a hint and get 4 free phones and 4 lines for $90 a month. US Cellular, built for us. It wasn't shocking to this show, that
Okay.
Penix went there, because my understanding going into the draft was that they would have been completely comfortable with Penix or McCarthy. And for them, it was two different plans. I think that they were more worried originally about McCarthy going higher than Penix. And it was, if Penix is the guy, he's playing right away. He's 24 years old. He was playing in a system where he was the guy and he was in command of everything. And if it's McCarthy, then they would have been planning on Sam Darnold. I think Penix would have been QB1 from day one, and Darnold would have had to outplay him in training camp to have a chance to be on the field. But the other way around, it was purely Sam Darnold. Now, and then McCarthy, there was really no plans to play him in the first year, in the first half of year, unless McCarthy had just been completely over the moon, which he was
on his way. He was on his way.
He really was. I truly have never seen someone develop so fast as JJ McCarthy did. So he was making it interesting. And now look how good Sam Darnold's been. Like that, you can see why there's a discussion for the future. But which one would they have taken if they were both on the board I bet there's one guy who knows that answer. I bet it's Kevin O'Connell, and that is it. And maybe Kwesi Adofo-Mensah, but I'm not even sure that he would have been, because this was one man's decision. This was Kevin O'Connell's decision. He went on a whole journey to visit every single quarterback, get them on whiteboards, put them through workouts. And the only thing I understand about that is that they just would have been good with either guy. I don't know. I mean, the thing is that they have Justin Jefferson. So you needed somebody maybe to come in and throw him the football right away who would have been a more developed passer. They might have picked Penix, but they're very happy with McCarthy. I really don't know. I think really think there's probably one or two guys who know that answer.
You talk about layers. I mean, the Jefferson, the offseason, I think of you and I think of like, don't worry, he's going to get his contract. And then eventually he does. And that sits underneath everything else they do. So yeah, I mean, maybe which quarterback they draft is maybe more than anything about Jefferson. And this sort of, also it's the coach's timeline, right? Are we rebuilding? Not really. Brian Flores is there. Like we're going to try to do this. And so there's a win now gene, if you will, in the mix that also affects it. And that's what makes the league so much fun to talk about, is every team has a different cocktail of motives and different things. I mean, years went by. Think of Buffalo and Allen, and like he was the 7th pick in the 18 draft. He was the 3rd quarterback taken. I had Brandon Beane the next training camp, and it was really, I don't know if I'm allowed to swear here. Am I allowed to swear here? I usually don't swear.
We can bleep.
I don't like, oh, no, never mind. It was a BS question that I asked him on the air once. Would you have taken Josh Allen at 1? And he's like, I can't tell you that, like, because it's not really fair. He can't win by answering the question. If he says yes, then Allen had better be the best quarterback of the bunch. There's a possibility, by the way, that the conference championship games are 4 quarterbacks from that first round. And wouldn't you love to see it? Darnold, Mayfield, Allen, and Lamar Jackson. Maybe we can get Josh Rosen to flip a coin or something for one of these games. But still, like, it's a tough question. But years went by. That's 6 years ago now. And then Tyler Dunn had a piece about how Terry Pagula, the owner of the Bills, loved Patrick Mahomes the year before. Well, if I'm going to buy a GD NFL team, I'm going to get the guy I want. And so he didn't do it. And they end up with Allen. Who knows? I think, with Cousins, there's still a chance for him in the future to matter in a league where everybody is so quarterback thirsty. And the point you make about the great quarterbacks are the ones who can sort of push off the age curve is correct, but that's a sort of a natural correlation. The better you are, the better you still will be. And to fantasy football, Cousins has always been a gift. I mean, because you haven't got the touchdown passes anymore, which is kind of sad. But he's sort of Jameis Winston is sort of a version of him. Now we have Winston being benched in Cleveland as well. They're out of it. You get that, but it sort of cancels any sort of fantasy potential for the Browns guys. Maybe for the Falcons, it's sort of a new injection of life here in Mooney, who went 0 against the Raiders. Man, London, Pitts, all of it. Who knows? Maybe it'll work out. The schedule is very comfortable, it seems, for Atlanta.
Maybe that's the answer for Kyle Pitts all along. He just needed Michael Penix to come in there and throw it to him. Although against the Vikings, he had one that hit him right directly in the chest. And a friend of mine says if it was a spear, it would have killed him, just right through the middle of the chest. And it bounced off him. So I'm not sure that that's ever going to work out. But I was reminded, though, as we were talking about when Kwesi adofo-mensah appeared on this show, which if folks are new to the show, you can go back and find that really great interview in the offseason with Kwesi adofo-mensah. And he talked with me about, this was after they drafted McCarthy, about the challenge of statistically analyzing JJ McCarthy because the sample size was so low. And not only that, but he was 21 and Michael Penix was 24. And so you had to believe in something that you didn't necessarily see. You could see tools, you could see leadership, you could see work ethic. And if you're Jim Harbaugh's favorite guy, that speaks well of you to be a potential pro quarterback. But there wasn't numbers that you could put on the table and go, okay, well, obviously the guy led the NCAA in passing like Michael Penix did. And it makes me wonder if both guys were on the board, if they would have felt that Penix was more projectable because he had a huge sample size. And even with someone like Bo Nix, who's going to be in the playoffs, and the draft analysts couldn't even stand saying his name. They hated him so much. And my thing was, the guy threw 45 touchdowns and 3 picks and got sacked like 4 times in college. That can't be bad. Like he just,
in 8
right?
years.
I mean, it's in 8 years. And I know, and that was probably the most overrated thing was the age. Age with quarterbacks is fine. The guy's going to play till he's 35.
It's even good. It's even good.
Exactly. And Kwesi kind of talked about that as a minor league type of season. And like, okay, well, that's just more development, more reps, more time on task, as they'll say. So anyway, I don't know the answer to your question, but I am fascinated, though, to see how he looks down the stretch. I mean, if he gets them into the playoffs, this could be kind of the Kaepernick, Alex Smith type of situation where the veteran quarterback is ending up on the bench watching from the sideline as the rookie's trying to go into the playoffs.
There is talent. I'm not sure it's right, but the comparison I'm sort of sensing is like when a hockey team makes a coaching change in March and it's like everything is the same, but we're going to have a new, like the Devils did that a couple of times and won. And it's just that or any of this. It's so hard to deny what you learn along the way when it goes back to the process of drafting these guys, you know, what they should have done. Nix now looks pretty obvious. I mean, it is a minor league season going from Auburn to Oregon and having like that sort of greater experience, you know, to show your skills. McCarthy was so tough, as you said, because he never passed. And so is that because he couldn't, or is that just because they didn't need him to? The Ohio State guys are always tough. The offensive line is perfect and the receivers are amazing. And I don't know, CJ Stroud last year, we're like, duh, look how good he is. It's like, I don't know. Because the question on him was always under pressure, he would bail. And that's what this year kind of looks like. So football is just always, it just always confounds. There are so many variables. There is so much luck, injuries, different motives, different schemes, principles, always. It's just like a washing machine that's always turning. And I guess if I'm using that metaphor, if you can keep that washing machine on low and just keep the variables to a minimum, that's the Bills. They have just not changed coaches. They kind of just sort of keep the offensive line. They sort of keep it the same and try to make that work. And, you know, a team is lucky if it's able to do that. Many of these losing teams, as the Bills were for many years, are always just the fan pressure comes. And what the Vikings always had was O'Connell. Like that was a consistent topic on our shows. And you know what, I'm drafting fantasy teams. I want to trust some of it. You can't know what it's going to be, but the Vikings, no matter what the quarterback thing was going to be, probably with the Jefferson contract, with the player he is, with Addison, that's a first round investment, what Hawkinson was, the paying for Jones. That was just kind of always going to be this team. Defense, if we talked early in the season, if the defense had been bad, that's even better, perhaps, for the upside stat-wise of the offensive players, but that didn't really happen. And the Vikings did grind out some lower scoring wins against bad teams because Jacksonville and Tennessee, like their defense is so good. Chicago last week didn't even really matter. So I don't know where I'm at in this conversation. I just love the fluidity of all of it. And it really is what makes all of it so much fun, because you think you know something and then the next week comes and you feel like you were stupid for thinking the way you did.
Yeah. And there's a part of me that thinks, well, certain organizations are good and certain organizations have no idea what they're doing. And this is sort of the explanation for a lot of this, right? And then the other explanation is complete and total randomness, which would be the Buffalo Bills with Josh Allen, because when I looked at his numbers from Wyoming, and I remember watching him in some bowl game years ago and going like, oh man, this guy's really big. Like, who is this giant guy? That was my full breakdown. Like, I didn't think twice about some guy from Wyoming who's huge. And then he's the first round draft pick. And you go, this can't be right. It just can't be right that someone who played so bad at Wyoming statistically could end up being a great quarterback, and insanely wrong. But it also can't be right that Brock Purdy is better by miles and miles and miles than Trey Lance, or the 100 other examples throughout NFL history that we have of this. How in the world can an indoor football league quarterback end up with Isaac Bruce and he's throwing him the ball like crazy? How could Case Keenum for a season, like all that? There's just hundreds of examples, which is what makes the NFL so beautiful, but it also makes it so perplexing to figure out who's going to work out. There is just as good of a chance that Kirk Cousins would have been phenomenal for the Falcons. I mean, they have an easy schedule and they have a terrible division, and he's got all these weapons. And for a minute there, the guy's throwing for 500 yards. You go like, okay, wow, I guess Kirk's really doing this in Atlanta. And then the injury or whatever else caught up to him. Defenses understanding that they were going to run on every first down, understanding that they couldn't do play action, which I think is really difficult, that they could only succeed in a couple of different ways. And then wildly awful throws that, I mean, he actually played really well against the Vikings, except for two of the worst throws you'll ever see, which turned into interceptions. And that's, again, sort of the league, like the thin line of this guy's playing great at quarterback versus this guy's playing terrible at quarterback is one ball slipping on him and just flying a little bit over his wide receiver, and the Vikings making a one-handed interception in the end zone. It just, that's the line you walk. So I really want to watch and see Michael Penix and how that goes. And I don't know. I mean, if you're Kirk, maybe after this, I don't know what he thinks. Like, does he think he's being wronged, or like, hey, we won the game? Or does he think that, like, I can't play anymore? I don't know.
You know him better than I do. I've always kind of, the reputation is sketchy. At least it was more so before the Netflix thing. I thought he came off as really believable in that show, which ran against what my assumptions were about Cousins. And then after the game against the Raiders, I watched his interview. They won 15-9. Of course, I'm staying up sweating. Please, not one more Jacoby Myers catch so I can, wake up in the morning. But he seemed, to me, his face and his words, like really sort of self-aware of what it was. And I don't know, what's that worth? I guess not very much. I would like to think he's not completely shocked or dismayed by the decision. A lot of us have been wondering when it was coming for a few weeks. So either way, it doesn't matter. But back to the original point, I think I wouldn't give up on him in terms of his entire career. Anybody could walk away. It's a lot of money to walk away from. The Falcons, they put rookie quarterbacks with veteran quarterbacks all the time. It's what the Vikings did. It's what usually happens, but you don't see it where that kind of financial commitment is made to the veteran, which makes the draft pick seem so strange. Like, when is he actually going to play? Maybe it's a little bit of Alex Smith and Mahomes, right? Where remember talking to the late Therese Paylor in the summer of Mahomes' rookie year. The Bills are the team that trades the pick to Kansas City for Mahomes. And he had tweeted something about what Mahomes looked like in practice. Like, he was amazing. And like, let's look this up. So we called him, and I'm like, how do you really know? What's practice worth anyway? Like, what are you seeing that's so meaningful to you? And he's like, guys, you just have to see it. You just have to see this guy. Like, he's incredible. And they went the whole year with Alex Smith. They gave Mahomes the token last game of the season that didn't matter. They went to the playoffs. They went home immediately. And the rest is history.
If you watch every one of those practices, you know everything there is to know. Like with even with training camp. I mean, okay, so I didn't know that they were going to win 12 games, but even if you just go back how I was talking about Sam Darnold after watching every training camp practice, it's like, guys, I've never seen someone throw the football up close like this. Like him, and there's a whole podcast I did in the summer about him and Justin Jefferson just seem to understand each other. And you could see it develop as practice goes along. It's not that complicated to watch a practice. Is it working? Like, does it look like it's working? And when it's bad, oh my gosh, you know it's not working out there when Kellen Mond is trying to operate a practice. So I've always felt like coming out of training camp, you get a really good sense for where a team is. But I'm sure with him, it was spectacular to watch him throw the football.
Remember last summer? Wasn't Darnold in San Francisco?
Yeah.
And there was a San Francisco writer that everybody made fun of because he said, I've never seen arm talent like this from a 49ers quarterback. And like everybody went like, oh, well, Joe
he's
Montana,
right. I guarantee
Young.
he's right. I guarantee he's right. I mean, if you talk about arm talent is anticipation and accuracy, but there's no way Steve Young threw the football as hard as Sam Darnold. It's not even close. Steve Young wouldn't tell you that. I mean, Kaepernick threw it hard, but he did not have touch on the football. He just whipped it at everybody. And once they figured that out, it was harder for him. Alex Smith was a number one pick, but he was more, he had a good arm, but it was more of like everything. All the sliders were set at 7 out of 10 for him.
Bryce Young, right? A little bit, just sort of like efficiency, accuracy.
Yeah. Like it's all pretty good and you can win with it. What Darnold does on a weekly basis is the ones where you stop, you freeze the tape and you go, how was this a completion? How did he see this? How did he throw there's one last week where when you freeze the tape from the behind view, Jefferson's not even in it. And he throws it over the middle, over a linebacker, goes right over his hand, just into that's the thing about the whole Darnold debate that I keep coming back to. Normally when we have these debates of, well, they're winning with this guy, should they stick with him or should they go to someone else? It usually, the guy has kind of had a pop-up thing and he's not that talented, but everybody likes him. That's how it normally goes. It doesn't normally go that the guy is an alien with his arm talent. So I mean, compared to Brock Purdy, it's not even remotely close.
And it's also yet another variable that most teams would have to take seriously is how is the wind blowing in terms of trends in the league? When Geno Smith woke up as the starting quarterback in Seattle, like almost nobody believed in that. He was not a first round pick. He could have been in his year, but he wasn't. EJ Manuel was the first quarterback picked, and then Smith went in the second round to the Jets, which is a death sentence, for Darnold, for Geno Smith, for anybody. So much turnover there and turmoil. And, what do you know? This guy's actually amazing. You have him this week, maybe, right? If he's healthy, Seattle?
If he's healthy. Otherwise, what's the record for getting sacked in a game? Because that's right? What Sam Howell's going to,
But, again, like Geno Smith shows up and you're seeing Mina Kimes clip passes he's throwing that are just as good as anybody. Well, where did that come from? I didn't know that was going to happen. And then Mayfield, he's on his fourth team now. My attitude, I usually sort of take it from the consensus, which is, they played a weak schedule and they made the playoffs at 9-8 or something like that. And they lost Dave Canales. So, okay, you want to pay him a big contract? Like that's maybe a good comp for Darnold, same draft. And look at Mayfield. Like he looks pretty unstoppable right now without Godwin in that offense. So this is a moment where the quarterback has the leverage. I mean, Darnold has the leverage in a month. Sorry to put this out into the ether, but if they lose, then it's different, and it'd be easier to same old Vikings, to sort of go back to the McCarthy idea. So, right now though, Darnold looks like a pretty good investment.
Oh, I mean, it's probably the best free agent signing in I don't know how long to lead a 12-2 team, to sign somebody at $10 million. And there was a lot of like Sam Darnold, they're going to usually lose it. But what people missed about it was something that Kevin O'Connell saw, which was if he's got arm talent like that and he's coachable and we can give him Justin Jefferson, then he's going to have a chance. And what has been remarkable to me is how coachable Sam Darnold really was, because some guys that are high draft picks are like, this is how I play. And like, you have to adjust to me. I'm not doing what you want me to do, that kind of thing. And that might be one of the reasons they haven't succeeded. But with Darnold, he's gotten better and better throughout the season. I thought the other night against Chicago, and this would be the fantasy versus like real football stuff.
Oh, let's go.
So he's not on point really with his deep throwing. And I think that they were playing to just try to keep everything in front. They usually do, but they may be doing a good job of it. Chicago's got some good players. And he went 14 for 16 on throws from 0 to 9 yards, including a 3rd and 17 they converted on an underneath pass, because he's playing smart and he didn't give away the football outside of 1 4th down that he just tossed up and it got intercepted. But that one doesn't really mean anything. And he has adjusted so much to not trying to do everything with his arm all the time and playing it safe when he has to, throwing the ball away, taking a sack when he has to. And then when the moment calls upon it, throwing an insane 52-yard touchdown to Justin Jefferson. It's been really something to watch him come along. And this is all the things you don't know, like how Baker Mayfield goes from a $4 million quarterback to now leading a division and looking dangerous. I've been talking about how I'm not sure the Vikings want to play the Tampa Bay Bucks in Tampa Bay because Baker beat them last year in the similar defense. And he is very, very talented and he's got arm talent to be able to throw it. And I'm just thinking about maybe development of quarterbacks and how it is so complicated now to play quarterback that it may just take this long. It's kind of like with baseball where, we've got this young prospect coming up at the age of 26. He's debuting in the outfield. And you're like, man, in football, that guy would be considered on death's doorstep. But with quarterbacks, I think as the league gets more and more difficult with how defenses dial it up, the mental part of it may just be something that has to come along later. And even with Caleb Williams, the other part is too, these guys come in as rookies and they get their asses kicked. I mean, so if you're not playing for a great team right away, Caleb Williams get destroyed out there. I mean, he probably shouldn't have even played this year the way that it looks now. And what is he? I sort of joked like in 2031, he shows up in Minnesota with Kevin O'Connell and turns it around or something. I mean, I think it's just a very, very difficult circumstance to come into. And maybe Darnold, this is who he always was, but it just was going to take time.
Again, so many variables. I mean, you're playing the Bears. You can play a conservative or a safer game. I mean, as interesting and satisfying as the Darnold season has been for Vikings fans, for football fans, you always love Geno. Like you always love these. How many good teams have the Vikings played this year? They played the Lions in week 6 or 7, the Packers early in the season. They won that game pretty nicely. Was San Francisco good? They were. We thought they were. The Rams, are the Rams good? At the most recent, it's the Rams. The Vikings have not played anybody anywhere near like good team status since LA, which, the Rams beat them in October, whenever that was. So that's what's still, and you talk about it's relatable in Buffalo, like Vikings fans kind of just sort of waiting for the worst sometimes maybe, or, Bills fans might do that. That's probably out there. There's probably a cloud sort of in the distance, even with now having caught Detroit. It'll be interesting here. Seattle, Green Bay, Detroit, which might be big in week 18. I still see the Vikings losing 1 or 2 of these games and having to face that Buccaneers matchup, or I guess it could be the Rams again in the playoffs in one of those spots. You're probably the 5 at worst at this point. And maybe Minnesota ends up favored there. I don't know. If they go to the Rams again, are they favored? They lost there the first time. So that's what's left for Darnold, and maybe for O'Connell even in a way, is to, win in the postseason. It's been a much better year than maybe anybody expected, but the schedule's been generous. Caleb Williams, it's one thing for Darnold to get to play the Bears. Here's Caleb Williams, a lot of the same schedule, but running up against a monster division this year. Man, the offensive line point I think is valid, but he's just missing all the time down the field too. Like whatever that is, timing. He's got good receivers. Their guys are healthy. Chicago, all the receivers we thought was the best landing spot for any quarterback ever, and it's a mess. 8 straight losses. Yuck.
Oh, watching the game back, it's him. It's not the line.
Yeah.
It's not the coverage. It's not the receivers are open. The plays are there. Poor Thomas Brown has to just be going, I don't know. Like, I don't know what you want from me. Roma Dunze's going, throw it over here. No. DJ Moore, anybody? I'm open. No, 5,
DJ
6.
Moore.
Yeah, I know. Right.
I don't know if he writes, but he's close to being at a point where he's got a great book on the quarterbacks he's played with.
Oof.
Tell all. This was the year he was supposed to finally have a good quarterback, and look at it.
Kind of, who was the other tall guy? Who was the other Bears wide receiver who was pretty good and he bounced around? He might still be on a team.
No.
Allen
Robinson?
Yeah, Allen Robinson. Same sort of thing. Maybe they get together and they just sip tea and look at each other and shake their heads. It's like, what did we do? What did we do?
Again on Darnold, McCarthy got hurt just in time, if I may, to open up Darnold as a draft option. And I'm not sure this is the only one. I've got some number of teams still kicking. The underdog best ball world is really cruel. I mean, you get your best teams get to week 15, and then you get grouped with all other best teams, and maybe you all have Saquon Barkley and he duds, or you have Derrick Henry or Mixon. The whole theme of the season in fantasy football was the veteran running backs who were undeniable, and then like Kamara, like most of them last week flopped. So you got those teams to the playoffs and then lost. But I've got one with Darnold on it that is in a tournament on Underdog called the Flock Community Contest, where you have to finish. Underdog is the best. I mean, there's so many different formats, just almost more than you can imagine.
Promo code purple.
Promo code purple. And we can all root for this team if you want to put that up in the Flock. So this is one where it's a 12-team draft like they all are, and you have to finish first over the first 14 weeks to advance, which this team did. And it squeezed out a win in week 15 by a couple points because Jacoby Myers didn't catch one more pass. So we're all happy about that except my opponent. And there's Darnold on it. And let me scroll and you can give me your thoughts. This is so the same Underdog best ball week to week. It's not set yet. I'll have a one-on-one this week. All the money in this tournament waits in week 17. So you have to make it to week 17 to win anything.
Well, I'm looking at some similarities to I am in second place in one of my best ball tournaments, and there are some similarities. And the two of them are Sam Darnold that I picked. Probably, I think I did it right after McCarthy got hurt, and we talked about it. Kyron Williams was also, I thought, a pretty safe bet for this year with the Rams, because who else was going to get the football for them in the backfield? They didn't have anybody else. Bucky Irving is an interesting one. He has emerged as a serious weapon for them. Yeah. And now he's RB1. Kind of curious about, you have Pearsall on your team. I'm curious about if
it gets gross down here.
Yeah, but I am curious about Pearsall, and if San Francisco is able to get him the ball to the end of the season. Like, San Francisco's not out of this. It feels like their season is completely over, but they're still bumping around in the mix. Poor David Montgomery out for the season now.
That's bad. I wanted. They're not trying to get the ball to Pearsall though. Like, that's what is sort of disappointing to me. Is maybe when they get out of it, they would do more of that. But Debo is nothing, and Pearsall is nothing. Who knew last Thursday? It's pick'em time, and it's a fun game. Rams 49ers. It's important. Who knew that San Francisco 49ers football players had never experienced the natural occurrence of water falling from the sky and thus be able to catch passes and do things in a football game? It was like it was battery acid or something. Like the players just could not function in the rain living in the Bay Area. Ugh, that was some of these pick'em weeks have been really close. That was not one of them. I thought it was the 49ers game. I thought the way it started, I was going to be right. I mean, Stafford throws here's an interception. Can I do anything else for you on this pass? But the guy's got a club on his arm and can't catch the pass. And there were a couple of tip passes that just fall to the ground, just like the rain. Very tough. No touchdowns in that game. I guess that was the play to expect that after the Rams had scored 44 against Buffalo.
Yeah, that it's in the NFL, that feels like a lifetime ago that they played that football game. But
yeah,
to your point, though, I mean, we're talking about quarterbacks and stuff, and Brock Purdy was MVP caliber last year, and they had McCaffrey, and the vibes were good, and the receivers were happy, and nobody tore their ACLs or Achilles or whatever it was with Brandon Ayuk. And then you have the Ayuk is going to sit out the whole offseason and fight with his team over the contract, and then they're going to trade him, and then they're not going to trade him, which distractions can be real in the NFL. And then McCaffrey is just the non-factor for the entire season. And it's not just that it's different from having two fewer superstars, but the feeling there was also different because the wind just went out of the sails of that team, and certain coaches can push through. I don't know if Kyle Shanahan's thing is pushing a team through that, or his thing is I'm a brilliant X's and O's guy, which there's nobody better still in the NFL than him. But Kevin O'Connell is the type of, Mike Tomlin is the type of, you know what I'm saying? Like this, I can bring us with, just my effort, my positivity, my belief in our team. We'll make it. And Tomlin somehow will make the playoffs that way a lot of seasons when they're not that great. I don't know if that's Kyle Shanahan or if it's more of, difficult environment when that happens. So all these things affect quarterbacks in lots of ways. The variables are so many that we really can't ever quite predict it. But now I got to pull back up my team here.
Come on.
Because
which one are we starting with? Which one?
I'm very proud. Well, hang on. Let's see. You gotta hold on. This app, very easy, very wonderful.
It's worth it. It's worth it to wait. This will be worth the wait.
I got to click all over the place to get it because I have done too many of these. But okay, so
you keep fidgeting. You've done too many of these.
Yeah.
That's the point.
I think it's like 7.
Think?
Yeah,
7. Let me tell you while you're getting it ready. I drafted 150-ish, at least 100, not 160, somewhere in that range. Best ball teams on Underdog this year, and you want to get a fair percentage of those teams to week 15. I got 25. I thought that was good. It certainly wasn't bad, but it's just best ball. Guys get hurt. All right. And then a lot of these tournaments in week 15, I mean, at the most, it's top 2 make it to week 16. Everybody's score resets, and a lot of them were just top 1. So I have a friend, Nick, who's won the main event in the FFPC back-to-back with his buddies, the Go Bills guys. And he texted me yesterday, is like, how many teams did you get through? I like this guy a lot. Like, he's not trying to dunk on me. It's like, how many teams did you get through to week 16? I'm like, Nick, 5. Excitedly. I knew it wasn't great, but I don't max out these tournaments. I'm just sort of sprinkling in entries when I can. I got 5 through to week 16. He's like, that's great. And I sort of felt like he was waiting for me to ask him. I said, how'd you do? He's like, 45. 45.
There's different levels of play, and all are welcome.
That one I showed you, so that'll be a head-to-head. I mean, I lost Engram. I've lost Montgomery. Well, hopefully the other person has also lost. Shaheed is even on that team, has lost guys, so it's sort of a fair fight. And maybe was Derek Carr on that team too? Anyway, we'll see. But if it makes it to week 17, that's in and of itself a win.
So this one I stand right now winning $9 is where I'm at with this one. It was a 12-person league, and my quarterbacks were Richardson, Herbert, and Darnold. And when I picked Herbert, I thought, well, that one should be great. He should throw for a bunch of yards, and sort of forgot that they were never going to pass with Jim Harbaugh, which is very quaint when they're beating some teams 17-13. You're like, oh, well, he's maximizing Herbert's efficiency. But then when someone puts 40 on them and they have no answer, it feels a little bit different to be playing from 1994 in the NFL. So Sam Darnold was the guy that I picked with probably my last pick in the entire draft, and has been far and away. Richardson, I have no answer for. I'm watching the first half of the game the other day, and I'm going like, it looks like he's pretty good. Then the second half is a travesty, a abomination to the sport for the way Richardson played. And that's how it always is with him. And I think we're probably approaching, he might just not be able to throw a football, which is sad. Kyron Williams was my huge pick at running back, but I also went old RB Joe Mixon, who has paid off big time for me. And in the year of the receiver struggling to put up big fantasy points, not this guy's receivers on this team, Justin Jefferson, Jordan Addison, Jackson Smith-Njigba, and Cortland Sutton are leading the way. And also Rashad Bateman has been okay. There's been a couple of weeks for him.
What's tight end?
My tight end situation is Laporta, Henry, and the league winner, Tyler Conklin, former Minnesota Vikes. Yes,
not Johnny Munt.
I drafted him every single time. Every draft.
This is a 17-week regular season confined league, right? This is not a tournament. So next time, it's your show. I wouldn't just sort of throw out $9. I'd say more triple up. Let's go with triple up.
But there was at the time, and this would still exist, there's no confidence whatsoever. No confidence whatsoever. It was just, hey, let me take my best shot. I'll try to get both Viking wide receivers. I'll draft a tight end fairly early because there's so few of them. Now I will say Jackson Smith-Njigba was a big one for me. Just thought he's going to break out. Lockett's getting older. Metcalf is inconsistent. Like they're going to look for, they're going to look for their guy. So some of these picks, and Cortland Sutton in Denver, who else was Bo Nix going to throw to? So it wasn't totally haphazard. There was some logic there. And
well, you're not in a tournament. You definitely you got there with Minnesota through the back door with Darnold, but you definitely want to correlate your receivers and your quarterback, your tight end, and your quarterback to a greater extent. And then also factor in who these teams playing late in the season, that week 16, week 17 correlation that's so important. You don't have to worry about that in this. We might have talked about that draft, right? Like we did a couple of these and older running backs. Kyron Williams is interesting because most people in my world did not want to spend a second round pick on him. It was more just receivers and then get running back figured out later. But it's been successful for sure. And Jefferson up top, that's how you had to start that draft, Jefferson Williams.
No, exactly. And I liked Williams and looked at who else they had, and the answer was nobody. So it was like anytime one guy is just going to get the football all the time, even if he's not the most efficient, he's going to get 1,200 yards and touchdowns and things like that. So
and that Laporta would have been your third round pick, possibly vice versa. Williams and Laporta. Tight end's been really tough this year. Last week, if you had Travis Kelce, he had 4 points. You're dead. Njoku was popular, doesn't play. Engram, mid-rounds, IR, Kincaid, whatever. Andrews got a touchdown, but he's almost like a big old-school tight end who falls into the end zone once. He had 2 catches, whatever. Like so many of those guys. Even Bowers' quarterback situation is so bleak. 8 points. You've got McBride. And Bowers is going to be up there. Just a bad week, maybe, but really tough. Investing in the elite tight end has not been profitable this year, and it's something I always love to do.
The reason I went with Laporta was just that I looked at the list and thought, I better do this because there are not too many of these guys that you could even really make a case for. And I figured if you get, and this is probably your logic, if you get the 1 or 2 tight ends who are great in a season, you're going to have a huge edge over everybody else because you're going to even out with a lot of the other stuff. But you have something that's kind of rare there. That's how I ended up with going with that. And then Henry, my thought was, well, they're going to check down. They can't protect in New England. And they're either playing a rookie or they're playing Jacoby Brissett. And either way, that football is not traveling too deep down the field. Drake May has made it happen. He's looked, if you're apologizing for Caleb Williams, tell me how Drake May's situation is better than Caleb Williams. And he's looked fine to really good sometimes, but just saying. Anyway, so we should
Ferguson, Goddard, Laporta. I mean, so many guys just failed you. You never know.
No, you don't. But I am proud of that team being in the race. We'll see how it works out toward the end here. I need Darnold not to make adjustments to underneath passing for this week against Seattle. Throw it deep, my friend.
You and me both. Both those teams, yours and mine. Darnold, Jefferson, JSN.
So let's take a look at these pick'ems here for this week. Underdog Fantasy, the easiest place to play fantasy sports, the fastest growing app in the industry. As you saw, I was navigating it easily through all of my wild number of fantasy teams. But we'll play the pick'em here, which is extremely easy. Just between 2 and 8 stats of your favorite players, you can win up to 20 times your money. And last week I was a winner. And for pick'ems for me, on the year, just my own personal pick'ems, I am crushing it to the tune of plus $1.80. I am $1.80 ahead for the year on my pick'ems after last week. I mean, I don't know what to spend it on.
It's green. It's written in green. You've got $9 in fantasy in the draft. You've got $1.80. I mean, you can get half a sub. with all this. I'm not putting it down. I've just been losing. You're playing that flex option on pick'em, right? Where you win if you get one wrong.
Yes. Yep. Which is what helped me last time because the guy got one more tackle. It would have gone a lot better. I'd be able to buy a lot more diet soda if he had not chosen to make that tackle, but it is darn. Anyway, so play along with us with the code PURPLE. You get your special pick, your first time deposit offer up to $1,000 in bonus cash. So even if you take some time to adjust, you'll have your bonus cash to work with. And you must be 18 or older. Terms apply. Concerned with your play, call 1-800-GAMBLER or visit ncpgambling.org. So what do we got for the pick'ems this week?
Denver and the Chargers, fairly important game.
Yeah.
More so for LA. I mean, likely 2 playoff teams. A little bit unfortunate, maybe disappointing that the playoff fields seem so set with still 3 games to go. But you've got here, there won't be weather to worry about in Los Angeles, of course, but you've got a second meeting of the season between division teams. The total for this game I see is 42. LA 2.5 and 42. So 22.25 to 19.75, that kind of game. It's just sort of Thursday night football. Last week, this was true anyway, after a season where there were lots of points. I just kind of like the lowers. I like field goals in this game. And you can play the kickers, Cameron Dicker and Will Lutz in this game. So if you see it like that, I wouldn't be afraid to go higher on maybe even both kickers. Denver's running back landscape is as crapshooty as anybody's, but the good news is, like, who cares? Because there's never really any production anyway. Once in a while, Javonte Williams had a big Thursday night game earlier this season in New Orleans, but I have no idea what Denver's thinking is game to game in the backfield. McLaughlin and Estime, I would just kind of stay away from that or just play lowers when it comes to the Broncos. Stone Smart for LA is interesting at tight end.
Hey, that's not a real person. I'm calling it. That's
two T's in Smart. Where is the second T? You're wondering. You can look that up for yourself. But I lost a good team when Will Dissly went out in the first half of the game in Kansas City. and that was pretty painful, but they immediately started throwing the ball to Smart in his place, and he put some numbers up. So I'd maybe go higher on him, but everybody else here I think is tough. McConkey has got sort of inflated numbers. He's good, but with an injury, I do not like how it feels to bet hires on Quentin Johnston, who's gotten to the end zone a few times. And with Sutton, I mean, you could play for a touchdown, I guess. I don't know. That's not a safe bet. Touchdown is never a safe bet. And everybody else on Denver is just who knows. Devon Vele and Marvin Mims. So I smell a field goal kind of game, under, lower, for the most part. And I haven't looked at defensive guys here.
Okay, my theory on this one is that the Chargers, after getting lit up by Baker Mayfield, are going to throw the kitchen sink at Bo Nix. And it's a real thing in NFL buildings. When you give up 40 points, they are going back to the drawing board and they're throwing everything at the next team. I'm thinking rushing higher for Bo Nix. Right now,
like
it's 20.5 yards. They're going to blitz. They're going to come after him. He likes to run. He's going to scramble and end up with more than 20.5 yards. And with Herbert, isn't the lower on interceptions just always a good play for Justin Herbert? 0.5 interceptions. It does feel like a conservative game plan for them. You always have the worry of a ball bouncing off of Quentin Johnston's hands and into someone else's hands for an interception, but Herbert is just really good at protecting the football for the most part. For the quarterbacks, I might go with that. As far as the oh, there's that second T on Stone Smart. He is a real guy. How about that? There it is. I mean, you can. Sorry, go ahead.
I'm just going to add Surtain makes it interesting there with the Denver matchup, but there's not like a lockdown guy with the Chargers if it's not McConkey. I wonder what Herbert higher rushing might be himself. That could be interesting.
Let me see.
If they offer it.
Yeah, I don't
like the Chargers backfield at all either. It's similar to Denver. Vidal would be the only guy I'd consider playing higher on. Maybe that's catches, something like that. But I would not, with Gus Edwards, it's really like a 1-yard touchdown run. Don't love it. Vidal at the sort of the passing down back. Tough game. Just a lot of replaceable parts with these two teams.
I do love the higher on the Will Lutz 1.5 field goals. I mean, that just seems like that's going to happen with that offense. Oh, man. We could just talk forever about all these teams, but with Bo Nix and watching Denver, what I can't figure out is if Denver is going to, once the Russell Wilson thing is off the table, if they're going to stack that thing around Bo Nix, and we're talking about like a Brock Purdy situation in a year or two, where he's just got everything and he's just got to operate it, make a few plays, or if it's a Daniel Jones type of deal where his first impression is, oh, he's pretty good, but there's not that next level to him to where they can actually really compete in that division. And it's not an easy division, but we'll podcast about that another time. The Deep End Fantasy Football Podcast, you do that. Also, ADP chasing, because I always want to say chasing ADP chasing.
That's on Monday mornings live on YouTube. You can search Ship Chasing. I'm trying to get them to change it to Shope Chasing, but you were first to, using my name in the title of the show. But ADP Chasing with Pat Crane, who won Best Ball Mania a couple of years ago, and Davis Maddock on Monday mornings.
And your football team in Buffalo, Ship Chasing. So we'll see how
it is.
Yes, see how that goes down the stretch. Always fun though, Mike. Glad to get together with you, and we'll do it again next week.
Thanks, Matt.